found Jeff on Facebook. We've been long-term renters and didn't have a real lot of money saved up, but we had enough. We asked Jeff to see if we could qualify for a loan. And about 14 months later, here we are sitting in our beautiful 4-bedroom, brand new home, absolutely ticking to death. If you've got any worries whatsoever, see Jeff, there's no comparison. We had no issues, none, not any. And I know that's hard to believe. Hand on the heart, that's how it was.
Somebody very wisely gave me your details, and I nervously contacted you, and you were extremely patient through that whole process of guiding me as to how to invest the money and what to do. And it took a long time to come to a decision, but we finally got there. And Jeff advised or recommended a builder that he'd used himself and other clients had used. And we looked at different properties. I liked the standard, and away we went. And it was built ahead of schedule, and it's only just been completed. I think handovers today.
So the property that I bought was in Queensland, near the Gold Coast. As I didn't know the area too well. Jeff was a subject matter expert around the area. He could tell me which suburbs to buy and which ones have potential for growth. And within the 12 months, under 12 months, it's actually grown to 65K profit. So you know what, I'm over the moon, and it's a positive cash flow property. So for me, it's a win-win. Really, thank you so much for finding me this positive cash flow property. Being in Sydney, I needed someone who could be my eyes and ears in Queensland. In the beginning, I guess for myself, I had never engaged a buyer's advocate, and I initially thought of doing it myself. But after engaging myself, I was more than delighted to get the property that I wanted.
An excellent, Jeff. Certainly learned a lot along the way. I obviously very green into the property investing side of things, and I've read a lot of books and that, but you don't really know what you're doing until you sort of get your feet wet. But really pleased with the way everything's gone. I think even just having that somebody to ask when you've got a question, there's no stupid question was left unanswered. So which is that's really big benefit. Certainly been a big help.
The good thing about it is that when we're really busy running our other businesses and so forth, and of course we could run around all over town looking for deals. The good thing was I found with you is I explained what we needed, what we were looking for, and you did it all running around. You actually, through all your contacts and so forth, because you know the market on the Gold Coast, you seem to know every nook and cranny here, you're able to find exactly what we're looking for. So hopefully you'll find us more. So the good thing was that we saved time. We got exactly what we're looking for. It worked out well, and we've got a great property with a very steady, stable, secure income. So very happy.
As a first-time home owner, I didn't exactly know the procedure to get started, and Jeff was really helpful with getting the nitty-gritty details of what to expect going forward, any challenges that may arise. So he was very, very detailed in that approach and making sure that I was comfortable moving ahead. He did a lot of the hard work behind the scenes to kind of make sure you find the correct the lot that I'm asking for, the right location, and this was all done behind the scenes. Jeff came back to me. Some properties I wasn't happy with the properties. Jeff again went back and did more research on exactly to cater to my needs. So yeah, I really appreciate that aspect of what Jeff brought to someone who's looking to buy their first home themselves. So it made things a lot more comfortable and I guess less daunting.
It was pretty unexpected, that's for sure, and how quick the build was completed. But happy to move out of that rental market and into my first property home. with the right people, the right advice, and the trust I needed to complete that goal. Everything ran pretty smoothly. I got in here just before Christmas, was able to spend that time with family, friends, and then to see what I had accomplished in a very limited time frame.
It was lovely to talk to Jeff, and like his expertise in this field was able to help me from New South Wales to move up here. It's been pretty daunting, but I thank you for Jeff's help. It's just amazing.
We are extremely happy to be in our own home. I have to say that it is a bit of a bumpy journey to do, but with Jeff, it was just so nice to have someone to bounce off, get ideas from, while we were fighting brokers and banks and whatever to get the loan. I think there were a few times where we nearly gave up. But we spoke to Jeff, we had other ideas, let's try this, that, and the other, and we finally got through, and we are very, very happy to be in our very own new home where we can do arty stuff like this and have fun.
I'd like to say thank you very much to Jeff. Not only did he find us the plot, he also found it in a very nice area that we really like. The builder that he arranged the build to be made by, they've been fantastic, really, really fantastic. I've got a bit of an eye for detail and the quality of workmanship. Everything's straight, everything's plumb, all the corners are done nicely, and yeah, we've been here for a little while now, and workmanship, excellent.
Okay, welcome along everyone. Tonight's presentation hosted by Jeff Tompkins, which is myself from GCT Property. So we'll just get into the slides and we'll get right into the presentation. So I hope everyone's excited and ready to learn tonight about how we can help reduce our home loan and pay off that property even faster. So we're going to cover some quite a bit of topic tonight and subject. There is a chat box down on your screen, down at the bottom of the screen. So any questions you may have during the presentation tonight, please ask away, and we will be able to answer those for you as well. So tonight's presentation is all about how to reduce your mortgage without working longer hours. I think it's a goal of many of us to pay our home loan off faster. So just a general disclaimer before we get underway. We don't obviously understand your individual investing requirements and financial position. So we would, of course, always recommend that you seek professional advice before investing in real estate. So tonight we're going to give you some case studies, some examples, and some sort of generic figures that I've actually used myself in the past. So just bear that in mind, and as we're running through the presentation. So could I ask who wants to pay off their home loan faster? So in the chat box, I'd love to see a yes if you'd like to learn more about how to pay your home loan off faster, and get rid of that noose around the neck in terms of the loan. So that's what our topic is tonight, and we're going to cover off that. So I'd love to see some comments on that and how we can help achieve that. So thank you everyone for replying to that. We're going with the presentation. So it's the scenario of if we don't take action, nothing changes. The harsh reality is these are the statistics if you don't take action. 80% of Australians will be on a pension or relying on government funding in their retirement phase. Many will be forced to sell their family home, and less than 1% will retire early. So this is really the cold hard facts that we all should be looking towards getting rid of that debt and building assets to fund our retirement. As we know in Australia, we have a great, system with we do get a pension, but as our population grows, there's going to be more of a strain on the government to fund that pension. We're all, living longer lives now, a lot more aged care now. It's quite a growth industry because we are living longer. Someone has to pay for that. As taxpayers, we are, covering that cost, obviously, but the government will have to look at that in the future about how they're going to be able to afford that in terms of taxes or putting limitations. So I'd employ everyone to think about how they're going to fund their own retirement and not rely, on the government figures. So my name is Jeff Tompkins. I'm going to be your host tonight. I've been a long-time property investor. I had a plastering rendering business in New Zealand, so I've been in the building trade for many years. Always had a passion for property. Used to renovate properties over there, built new subdivision. So I had quite a experience of property investment. Spent many years dealing with, finance specialists, property managers, solicitors, etc. And it really helps guide my clients through the whole process and give them the confidence and explain the step-by-step process. As you may have seen from some of those testimonials there, whether those clients were buying their first home, which is always a nervous experience, or getting into their first investment property. It's always a big step. Buying property is your biggest financial investment in your lifetime for most of us. And it's really important that we get that right. And we have the confidence, and we also have that good experience that we know we can go through and repeat the process once we've gone through and got our first home. So how to reduce our home loan term? So there's 3 key ways we can do that. So the number one, first thing we'd do is I'd recommend is everyone should pick up the phone tomorrow morning and call their lender and ask for a discount or a negotiated rate. As we're all aware, interest rates have been rising this year. First time we've seen that. I bought my first home when interest rates were 20%. So having interest rates much higher was nothing new to me. Property prices, we're still growing with those high interest rates, but it does affect our cash flow and our living standard, obviously. So as you know, with the banks, with those interest rate rises, they're pretty quick to increase our rates. And unfortunately, they treat new clients or customers better than their loyal customer base. It's just a fact of life, just a reality. So what I would do is I'd recommend looking at what your loan to value ratio is. So for example, if you've got 20% equity in your property, look at what other lenders are offering for either 20% or 80% LVR, and then getting some of those rates from the other major lenders, and then calling up your bank. I actually went through this process myself 2 weeks ago for one of my investment properties and negotiated a better rate. So generally the banks won't offer you that discount, but it's always worth asking. Just explain that you're looking around, we need to be competitive, it is costing more. So it's a great way of instantly reducing that the interest that we pay to the lender. Another way is we can set up an offset account. So for any of those that are new to funding and having an offset account, it's very important to have that. If we've got cash or money in the bank, it's really not working for us now with inflation rising, as we know, and the bank's paying a pretty low return on our cash. Money in the bank is generally going backwards. So we need a better place to park that cash. So if you've currently got a mortgage, a great way to have that money working for you is having it into an offset account. Essentially how it works is any money in that offset account is reducing the amount of interest we're paying on the balance. The good thing about an offset or a redraw facility is we've got access for that cash when we need it. So if we're putting money aside for a tax bill or a holiday or a new car, again, sitting in savings account not really working, a much better way is to park it into that offset account, reduce that interest, which is going to help pay that loan off faster, and then we can always redraw that cash when we need to. And of course, thirdly there, we can use a positively geared investment property. We can take that cash that property is generating, and we can inject that cash into our home loan and pay that loan off faster. And that's what we're going to focus on the strategy tonight. So give you some detail around it. We're actually going to go into a mortgage calculator and show you the effects of plugging that extra cash into your own home. So 3 of the key takeaways that you'll learn tonight: how to calculate the net cash flow of investment property. Very, very important. It's like when we get paid wages, we get paid a gross salary, but we only get to spend the net amount after the tax components come out. Same thing with a investment property. It's the net cash flow of an investment property. So quite often you'll see properties advertised with a yield or a return or a cash flow. Just very important to understand, is that a gross figure or is that a net figure? And so it's a net figure we should always be looking at. How do we find these positive income properties? They are a bit of a rarity. Most property, now that interest rates have actually started to rise, are not going to be positively geared. So we've got to really dig a bit deeper and find these specialised properties that give us generally more than one income source to overcome that cash flow and these rising interest rates. And we're going to show you how to reduce your home loan and reduce the term of the loan. And not only that, also you're going to be able to save thousands in interest. I think it's a lot of, as Australia, Our number one priority in life is once we've got our own property is to pay that debt off. It really frees us up and a much more comfortable lifestyle, especially going into retirement. So we need to really get moving with this. Nothing happens unless we make a decision and make a change. So I employ everyone to have a look at where you are currently, what your goals are going forward, and what your plan is to fund your own retirement and not rely, on a government pension that may or may not be around in 10 or 20 or 30 years' time. So how do we find these positive income properties? So if we look at the chart on the right-hand side there, looking at the average yield, right around Australia, and especially if you're looking at a property in Sydney or Melbourne, the yields there are pretty low, and that's the gross yield before all the property expenses are coming out. So if you buy the average home in the average suburb, it's going to be pretty challenging to actually find a positively geared property. Majority of property in that situation will be, negatively geared, which is what we don't want. So you'll notice there in the figures that the units are giving a higher yield, but just remember that's a gross figure. And generally with units or apartments or townhouses, any property in the community title, there'd be body corporates and other expenses, which can reduce our yield. So just bring it back to that, always that net yield after all the property expenses. So if you're looking at a property in a community title, it's very important to find out what the body corporate is, how much is in the sinking fund, especially if it's a high-rise apartment, a lot of costs involved with maintaining those and making sure there's no big expenses if you're going to buy into that building or that community title. So just a little key tips here to always ask that question before you go ahead with the purchase of the property. Of course, with the units, quite often the body corporate will include the building insurance as well. So there's some of the gardening and maintenance as well. So always look at that. Property types. So as I said, a standard unit or house or townhouse is not going to give us that positive cash flow that we really need to fast track our home loan and pay that off faster. So we need to look at these properties that are a little bit unique. Generally, to get this positive cash flow, we need properties with more than one income source. So how do we calculate the net cash flow of an investment property? So look at the yield, we look at the gross, and then we need to calculate the net yield. So what we need to do is look at the gross figure, and then we need to take all the property expenses, all the purchase costs, all the annual running costs of that investment property. We need to take that off the gross figure, and that will give us the net figure. How much is that property paying us or costing us per week? So why do we need to know this? A couple of big key reasons. This is going to affect our borrowing capacity. So many that have gone through a refinance over the last 3 or 4 months, as interest rates have now started to rise, it's really reduced our borrowing capacity with the lenders because they're factoring in a 3% generally above the current rate. So if you're paying 4%, for example, the banks are calculating that you can afford to pay 7%. So that really reduces our borrowing capacity. So the more income we've got from this investment property, the higher the borrowing capacity. So I know a lot of buyers have sort of held off the market, now trying to get into the market where there's less buyers around currently, but they're very restricted by the borrowing capacity. So and this is where a good finance specialist will really come into their own, have a huge benefit. So big shout out to finance brokers out there. They've got a multitude of their lenders. The banks are generally changing their policies, and if they're looking to build their banking portfolio, they'll give some incentives sometimes, or there might be reduced application costs. So that's where a great finance specialist can really look at what the best situation for you. As a borrower, we're all different. We have very unique situations. So that's why a broker can look at your financial position and then recommend the best lender. So improve your borrowing capacity, and of course it improves your cash flow, which is really important. As we know with property, it doesn't always grow in value. About 2/3 of the cycle is pretty stagnant. There'll be years when the property actually drops in value. But you're looking for the long term. So anyone new to property investment, it's not a quick get rich quick scheme. It's a long-term investment. If you go back to property in Brisbane or Adelaide or Perth or Sydney or Melbourne 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, those properties were performed very well over the longer term. So not every year they've grown in value, but those years they have shown some great returns. So it's that long-term growth of the property, and having that positive cash flow allows us to hold the property even if it's not growing in value. Or if our income drops, as long as that property is supporting itself, means it just takes care of itself. We don't have to be too concerned about managing the the income or topping up the mortgage on the investment property. So the screenshot on the right hand side, this is a property investment analysis. This is a very detailed cash flow report. So it's one that I use myself for my own investments as well as my clients. But as a summary on the left hand side there, this is based on a high cash flow performing property. So not a standard home, won't give these sort of returns. So high cash flow property with multiple income sources. This property purchase, in this example, we've used a purchase price of $758,600. We've based it on a 10% deposit and a rental income of about $860 per week. So you can see in the breakdown there, the purchase price, $758. We've allowed for purchase costs. So purchase costs are things like stamp duty, solicitors costs. So very important to be aware of all the purchase costs. And down in the loan costs there, those are things like lender's mortgage insurance, holding costs, bank application fees, etc. We've used the deposit, the 10% plus costs. I've used around about 100,000 deposit on this property. So our gross rent per week is $860 per week. So over the year, about 43,000 in gross income. Mortgage payments used 4.6%. So the mortgage payments per year in year one are 31,590. And then we've got to take off the rental expenses. So the rental expenses of 12,000, or just over 12,000, these are things like rates, insurance, property maintenance, property managers' costs for collecting the rent. So all those costs need to be included. So this is a summary page. This report actually gives us a 5-page report with all the breakdowns. We're just looking at the, the summary page. In this case, depreciation. So this is a brand new purpose-built high cash flow investment property. Very good tax benefits there. So we've put in a client's taxable income there of 90,000. So this will affect the cash flow, your taxable income. So based on this scenario, based on these figures, which are generic, as I mentioned earlier, we're getting about 8,000 in tax benefits in year one. So including the rent and the tax benefits after all the expenses, the loan, the rates, insurance, property management, etc. This property is about $141 per week positively geared, which is fantastic. And as you can see there, it's a 10-year forecast. So year one, year two there, 165, year three, year 5, and year 10. So the income, you can see, just gets stronger and stronger. So again, this is going to be tailored based on your financial position, but we're just using some fairly generic figures in this case. So it's a great result. So we're going to look at this property and we're going to plug it into a mortgage reduction calculator. And we're going to be fairly conservative in the figures when we take it into the calculator. So if we were generating $6,000 per year with this positively geared investment property, tell me what you'd like to do with that extra income. How would you like to spend that? So I'd love to see some comments in the chat box as we're running through of how you intend to spend that $6,000 if you had that ability. Just remember, as we're going through, there's a chat box there, so you're welcome to ask any questions. At the end of the presentation, I will have plenty of time to go through the Q&A. Okay, so the correct answer is we're going to take that surplus income and from the high performing cash flow property, and we're going to put it into our own home here. So this high performing property could be a number of properties. It could be a dual occupancy, could be a duplex, could be a co-living type property, could be rooming accommodation. Just reading the chat's going through. Yep, great. So thanks, Nishant and Sikandar. Great idea. Both mentioned paying the home loan off. So the property on the left-hand side, this is a dual occupancy property. I've actually built a couple of these myself. So this is actually 2 residences. So we've actually got 2 tenants, 2 rental incomes, which is much stronger than a standard home. So we can access these specialised high cash flow properties. As I mentioned, whether it's a dual occupancy, whether it's a duplex, co-living or rooming accommodation, these have all got multiple tenants in place. So it really, fast tracks that income, gives us that surplus income, which is going to allow us to pay off this home loan, much, much faster. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take that surplus income and we're going to see how we can use it to reduce the mortgage and the loan terms. So home loan calculator here. So let's say we bought a property today with a loan of 600,000 over a 30-year mortgage. We're going to pay back for that, for the privilege of that $600,000 loan. We're going to pay back to the bank $1.1 million based on the current interest rate over a 30-year term. So what that means is we're paying almost double back to the lender. So, you know, if that doesn't spur you into action, I think nothing will. That means we really need to focus on generating that extra income and getting rid of that debt as fast as possible. I just got a question in there about the tax. No, so we've actually already allowed for the tax benefits, the tax to pay on that property. The great thing about an investment property is we can claim a lot of tax benefits. One of those benefits of a new property is depreciation. So even though it's making a positive income, we can actually claim the tax benefits, which reduce the amount of tax. So we've actually allowed in that property investment analysis, we've actually allowed for the tax component of that property. A quick question. Okay, so let's take that positively geared cash flow from that investment property and see how we can use that to reduce our home loan. So we used a generic figure of about $6,000 per year, which is about $500 per month. So we've plugged that extra repayment there of $500 per month into our $600,000 mortgage over 30 years. And the net result is we've reduced that loan from 30 years down to 22 years and 6 months, which is a massive difference. So we've not only taken 7 years, 6 months off the loan term, we've also saved $144,000 in interest, which is massive. So imagine trying to save up that $144,000. You know, I know myself, it's very, virtually impossible on the average wage. So by simply having another structure, we can actually fast track that loan. And imagine if we had 2 investment properties and double that time we're going to shave off the loan and double the interest that we're going to save. So you can see that compounding effect of the interest over the longer term. So it's not just in the first year, but as the property increases in value and the rental increases, we can even track that repayment figure even faster. That's why it's so important to be aware of all the figures. It's not just a matter of going out and buying a property and hoping for the best. We've actually got to do the numbers, the scenarios, so that cash flow analysis that we look for before we talk about a property or a location or even the type of property. We need to know how that property is going to perform before we can make that decision whether that's the right property to go for. So I know from these figures, those are very strong properties. They're very unique, they're very specialised, and that's why we focus on finding those properties to help our clients achieve, you know, financial wealth and get rid of that mortgage. So I hope that's a good case example of how the figures can actually work in your favour. Of course, the figures are going to vary depending on your, you know, financial position. But again, I used some fairly standard sort of figures there to give you a bit of an indication of the importance of actually taking action and getting cracking with this, because delaying the decision will only mean you pay more interest to the bank. Who wants to do that at the end of the day? So as you know, the banks are very successful, very wealthy, but we need the banks. We need to be able to borrow money to afford our properties, of course. But we just need to work a bit smarter, not harder. So again, when I haven't gone to work and haven't done, you know, double shifts or earned extra income, we just relied on another asset to provide that extra income. And if you can combine that with some extra savings or an offset account, we can reduce that loan term, you know, even faster. So here's a couple of a few actually case examples of clients that have gone through the process that have helped in the past. Some of these clients you would have seen in the testimonials. So we're not even getting the benefit of the strong cash flow, we're getting the benefit of the capital growth as well. So these properties are based in Southeast Queensland. We're also focused on helping the clients into property. Been a very strong market. Queensland is really the growth, one of the growth corridors currently in Australia. But very strong, you know, population growth, demand for property, running out of land and properties. And there's a lot more demand than supply, and that's giving us as property owners or investors great capital upside as well. So Russell and Helen, purchase price $500,000 in July 2021. So here we are 18 months later, property's currently valued about $700,000, 200,000 equity uplift, which is fantastic. And I can actually send you the testimonial if you'd like to see their feedback on how the process went. Thomas bought an investment property in southeast Queensland, in the area known as Homeview, for 439,000 in 2018. It's probably currently worth about 580, so 141,000 profit in just over 4 years, which is fantastic. And now the rents have started to rise, and those properties that these are fairly standard homes that might have been just mutually geared at the time, and now as the rents have increased over the last couple of years, they're starting to really show some great income. Sean there, so we helped Sean with a built finished property in Coomera, northern suburb of the Gold Coast, purchased for 490,000 February 2021, and here we are just under 2 years later, and current rate about 655, so 175,000 in equity uplift. Clyde bought his first property, 520,000, just over 2 years ago. Current value about 750, so 230,000 in equity uplift. So it's not only the cash flow that we're getting from the property, it's also the equity. Of course, we are in very time for sensing fantastic capital growth. That's not the average, but it just shows you if you hold on to those properties for the long term, you look at the long term average property in Australia and capital cities, the average house has doubled in value about every 7.5 years. So pretty incredible. If we've got 10 or 20 years to go to retirement, we can actually really get started and use this great income and equity growth to help fund our retirement. So we're not only reducing the term of our home loan and saving thousand interest, we've also got another asset that we can sell at retirement to help put towards funding our retirement. So we're going to offer everyone a one-on-one appointment. So if you'd like to find out about more how it works, as I explained at the start of the presentation, those numbers were very generic. It will vary depending on your individual situation. But if you'd like to understand a bit more and have a discussion with myself, you're welcome to click into the chat box. And Lisa, my operations manager, is here with me tonight. She's put the hyperlink in.
Not yet.
Not Lynn.
Get it in.
So Lisa will put in the hyperlink in the chat box. You can just click on that and book an appointment. It'll go into my calendar. Or if you'd like us to contact you, and Lisa can call you tonight or text you and book in a suitable appointment, just put a yes in the chat box now, and we'll actually go in and contact you. Or you're welcome to click on the hyperlink once it's in there. It's in there. Thank you, Lisa. So you can actually book an appointment at a suitable time, or we can have a quick 10 or 15 minute discussion, whether it's your first property or first investment property, or you need to understand a bit more detail and how it works, or your options. Welcome to book a quick call. We'll have a discussion, give some ideas and some information. And that starting point is really the next step, is to find out what can we do. So we can talk about it till the cows come home. It's not really going to change our financial position. We really need to take action. So if you don't want to click on the hyperlink, just type a yes in the chat box, and Lisa will be in contact to book that strategy call. No obligation, there's no cost to it, so it's just a quick discussion, find out your situation. I'm sure you'll have a lot of questions after tonight's presentation, how it works in a bit more detail, but I hope it's just given you some insight of the importance of finding the right investment property and how you can have a very, very good outcome. I get a lot of questions, would I do that myself? Yes, I've built 2 of these high cash flow properties myself to get that extra income to pay off my home loan faster. So, and I currently got an offset account attached to that loan. So exactly what we're helping our clients set up. So I would ask everyone to ask the question to yourself: what would your future look like in 10 years if you don't take action today? Do we still want to be talking about it and said, we've all, gone to a barbecue or met with friends or family and said, hey, what happened if we bought that property next door 10 years ago? I'm sure we all got stories of when we bought our first property, or we saw properties, what they were going for 10, 20, 30 years ago. And hey, wouldn't we love to go back and buy those properties today? I know my first property was 40,000, my first unit in New Zealand. So imagine if you kept those properties and just rented them out, cash flow positive, massive capital growth, you could really retire very well. So never too late to start, but the sooner we start, the better we're going to build that portfolio, and the sooner we can pay off that home loan. So I would employ everyone to have a look at where you are now, what your goals are, and if your goal, if you're really serious about paying that home loan off, you really need to say, well, today's the day, take action, and let's get cracking with this, especially as interest rates are starting to rise. Our mortgage, we've all seen our mortgages increase this year, and it's really important to have that other asset that's growing in value then is not a drain on our cash flow. And that property is going to help fund or pay off our mortgage at retirement. So whether it's one property or your goal is a property portfolio of 5 properties, we can help you build that step by step. It's really about getting the first one right to give you the confidence to have a good experience and say, okay, I understand how it all works. It's not just finding the property. There's a lot of other fundamentals that need to be in place. So if you're new to property investing, having a good solicitor on board, really critical. Talked about earlier about finance specialist, really important to have good finance specialists, whether it's you go direct to the lender or have a broker on your behalf. A good property manager, probably one that's overlooked, but I've dealt with many property managers over the years, and I can honestly say a good property manager will save you a lot of time and stress. So don't be afraid to pay the property manager well, because they will make your investing journey a lot smoother. One thing to be when you're considering property investment, we talk about these high cash flow properties. We need to consider the vacancy rate when we're starting to look at locations. So what we call a tight vacancy rate is 3%. So if you're looking at properties or looking at locations, always find out what the vacancy rate in that suburb is. So they consider a 3% vacancy rate a very tight market. So what that means is for every 100 properties listed for rent, there's about 3 that are vacant, because there's always people obviously coming and going. So if you're looking at a vacancy rate of 5, 6, 7%, too high, it means you may struggle for tenants. If you look at a vacancy rate under 3%, there's generally a fairly tight market. And as I mentioned earlier, Southeast Queensland, many suburbs are around that 1 to 2% vacancy rate, extremely tight. We've got the strongest population growth in Australia currently, which is great news for us as property investors. It means we're getting a multitude of tenants, and it means every time the leases are re-signed, we're generally putting up the rents. So I'm sure I could hear stories from you attending tonight that you've seen the rental growth over the last 6 to 12 months. And we've got such strong population growth that's putting a real pressure on investment properties, which is great for our return and also help improve our cash flow, over the longer term. So a little bit of a bonus there for anyone that goes in and books the strategy call tonight. So whether that's going in and booking the link direct to the hyperlink, or just putting a yes in the chat box, this will call you. So what we're going to offer is a 7-night holiday package, a choice of 3 locations there. So all international locations, those are all the resorts there. So we've got 1 ticket to give away. So what we're going to do is everyone that books the strategy call tonight will go in the draw, and we'll draw it tomorrow morning, and myself or Lisa will give you a call to the 1 winner. So one condition of that, you must book the strategy call and you must attend the call. So once you've attended the strategy call, we'll post out the vouchers. Just a little thank you there. We really appreciate the time that you've spent with us tonight. We do understand everyone is very busy, and that's why really a lot of people talk about property investment but really never get around to it. They put it off one day, and now we've seen the last 2 years since of COVID, where a lot of forecasts what was going to happen with the property market. Those forecasters, the media, really got it wrong. Forecast all that doom and gloom, as we know now in hindsight. We should have all bought more property during that COVID period. So properties have gone very well. So Australia, when you look at generally, is a very good, well-respected international destination now. Very secure, very safe. I hear stories. I was talking to a client yesterday about investment properties over in Italy, where they can have squatters move into the properties, and they can't evict them. A lot of properties you don't own the land in a lot of countries. Australia is very safe and secure. So we're starting to get these international investors very smart. Have seen our market here, very stable, very strong. There is a lot of red tape about property investment in Australia. Very difficult to get a loan application, but the good thing is it protects the market here, and that's why we haven't seen any of those dramatic falls. We've gone through share market crashes, GFCs, etc. A lot of financial crisis over the years, natural disasters. But again, if you look back in time, we've got to take away that short-term memory of the last disaster, but look at the property, how it's performed over the long term. So yeah, love to have a chat with you, see if we can help you. For anyone that's already booked, had a few strategy calls already from people that have booked for the webinar and wanted to get in quick. So we've had a few calls over the last couple of days. So yes, you will be going into the draw as well, so you won't miss out. So just a little appreciation there. So just for anyone that missed the introduction, this is just a client that went through the process. So just a brief discussion. So clients of the application of how the process works and how smooth it can be, and, the right help. So Desmond, we met about 3 years ago, I think, initially. Yeah. And you're looking to create wealth for your retirement.
Exactly, yeah, I found a sort of position where I so best. I tried unsuccessfully to do that myself, not knowing where to go or what to do. Somebody very wisely gave me your details, and I nervously contacted you. And you were extremely patient with that whole process. Providing minutes without this. A long time for
Right. So that we gave you a brief of what you're looking for, a price point, some recommendations, get a property, got it constructed, and just that find out the process once the property is complete, the client expects to hand over.
yeah, well, once I made the decision, I was sort of nervous how it's going to go, but I did think through every process that comes together, really explain everything, layman's terms, how it's going to go. So, the problem manager quickly
So it's been about 2 years now, and it's been worked out. 100% occupancy rate, which is a good result. So, so you probably came back to me about 12 months ago. We put up you seriously done the game. Yes. So.
Once again, that provides somebody to get the market well and get the areas for the house. I'm just fairly confident next time around. And what it requires is first time it was really hard to get my head around that this problem. Giving it.
Okay, so I hope that's given a bit of insight to what you can achieve if you have the right support and people around you. Like anything in life, you want to get ahead, you have a coach or a trainer, and they can use their experience and guidance to really help you, and again make that journey, a successful one. And Desley was a great example there of very, very nervous, getting close to retirement, knew she wanted to get property, couldn't get started, engaged a specialist, and went on to get a second property, and good results. So just to show you that, working with good people, the right experienced people, can answer those questions and concerns you may have. So we are going to open the chat box up now and get back to those questions. We have got another webinar coming up in 22nd of November at 6 p.m. and we're going to have a financial planner specialist there. So this is just a specialised webinar about the benefits of having a financial plan in place. So it really ties in well with property because it's whole portfolio, putting that plan together to retire with your own assets and not rely on the government funding. So we'll have a financial planning specialist, Marcel Jacobs, runs his own business. He's very experienced, very detailed. Recently did a financial plan for myself and gave us some great confidence going into retirement that we had everything in place and changed a bit of the structure around as well. So again, having that professional team really will give you that confidence, and also build your wealth and give you that security, that peace of mind that you are on track. So they can do forecasts on how your super is going to perform how your property is going to perform, and what you need to do to make that plan, financially secure it at retirement. So look forward to that webinar. We'll be sending an invitation over the next day or two with the link for the next webinar. Be again 6 p.m. Queensland time or 7 p.m. Victorian New South Wales time. So I hope everyone's enjoyed the presentation and got some value out of the benefits of having that right property and the way it can be structured, and how you can actually really use that to get ahead to build that financial plan. I've got a couple of questions about there. How does it work in terms of property and locations and figures? So the first step is having that bit of a discussion and finding out what your borrowing capacity and what your plan is. So whether it's to build that first investment property or that you're looking to build a multiple property portfolio. In terms of the questions there about what types of properties, what locations, that will be really a case-by-case basis. So this is where you really need to have that one-on-one strategy call. We can discuss the options. Happy to go through, happy to send you some case examples, happy to show you, a real life property example. But again, just bear in mind, always go back to the cash flow, always work on the net yield of that property. So the real income after all the expenses, the net cash flow, and then plug that cash flow, take that surplus cash flow and plug that into a mortgage calculator, and we can show that we can have a plan, stick to the plan, and once you're comfortable with that property, if your desire is to go and build a multiple portfolio, it gives you that confidence that you've got the first step right. Like anything in life, mixing it up, taking that first step is always the hardest, as you saw with Desalee, but doing it right, it's a great outcome. If you've spoken to anyone that's owned property that bought 10, 20, 30 years ago, the right property, that is, the wealth and the cash flow has been, very strong. So again, it's getting that first property purchase right, and it's going to set you up for your, your future life. So a bit of guidance there. It is really important to have all that plan in place and have the figures so before you go out and buy that property or inspect that property, how that property is going to perform, in terms of cash flow. So in terms of the strategy call, yes, so just to clarify a question there about the length, so about 10 to 15 minutes. We can book in. Yes, I do after hours appointments. So if you're busy working during the day, yes, happy to. So I asked about my license. Yes, I am a licensed real estate agent. I've been investing in property myself for many years, and just love the fact of helping clients getting ahead and looking back and sharing those stories that we saw at the start of the webinar with their journeys and how they've improved their financial position. So great time with property in Australia. We have got a lot of good things, positives going forward. We've come through some pretty challenging times over the last few years. But what I would always recommend is take advice from those industry experts. Don't listen to the media with those scare tactics, but listen to people that have been in the market, got steady heads, got experience in actually doing it themselves. So if you're speaking to anyone about property, always ask them, do you have property in yourself? If it's an investment property, ask the question, do you own investment property yourself? So we always look at that position and that experience and guide you towards going into the, the future. Okay, so Q&A. So if we've got any other questions, please type them in the chat box now, and we'll go through it and answer those. We're just going to open up the Q&A. So we did have a few questions coming through. So again, thank you everyone for your time this evening. Yeah, to clarify that strategy call, yeah, there is a hyperlink Lisa's kindly put in the chat box there, so you can actually just click on that. That goes through to my calendar. You can book a day and suitable time. If you would like to speak to one of us, just put a yes in the chat box, and Lisa's making a list of the names, and one else will be in contact to book that strategy call. Questions about interest rates, what's going to happen. So no guarantee with interest rates, but again, look at what the banks are offering over the the next 2-3 years in terms of fixed rates. It's interest rates with something we can't control, but just remember back to when 2010, 2011 interest rates were around at 10-11% and property prices were still growing. So what affects property price growth more than anything is supply and demand. Yes, interest rates have an effect. They have an effect on cash flow. But it's more about that supply and demand. So if you're looking to invest in these high cash flow properties, you need to be buying in areas where there's a shortage of property and where you're getting a higher than average yield. Just remember back to that first slide about negatively geared property that's not going to get you, pay off your mortgage faster. So we need to find those specialised properties where we're getting that higher than average income, and then take that income and plug it into our mortgage. So let's we've wrapped up all the Q&A. So thank you everyone for attending tonight. Okay, hope you've seen some great value, and good luck with your property investing journey. And I'd love to speak to you at some point, and reach out. Just a couple more questions coming through, so we're just going to check those. Yep, that's Karen. Some facts and information given. Thank you, appreciate that. So as I mentioned earlier, been a long-term property investor, seen some great markets that we've come into. I think we all would look back and say, wish we bought more property at the time. I understand it's not always possible, but we can learn from those lessons. We can't change the past, but we can certainly, learn from those. Thanks, Nishan. Great insight, Nishan mentioned. So great. Thank you for that feedback, everyone. Yeah, really enjoyed the presentation. As I mentioned, there's some property with some great returns at the moment. Great time to get into property. There's probably less buyers around than there was 12 months ago in many areas, and it's given some investors some great opportunities to secure great property. In terms of questions about construction, yes, and how we source properties. So yes, we source existing properties. So if your preference is for a built property, yes, absolutely, we can source that. However, if your goal is to achieve financial freedom and paying for your mortgage faster, generally these new higher cash flow type performing properties will perform, much stronger. One question just to remember in mind when you're looking at those high cash flow properties, if it's an older home with an added granny flat, just always make sure that it's always council compliant. There's a lot of illegal building structures in Australia that have been added onto councils, and regulations, and even insurance companies aren't always covering those properties because they're not legally built. So, and to be able to be rented out, so always check that as well. So that's where those new, purpose-built investment properties, all compliant, attract great tenants, and your insurance will be very easy to secure for that property, which is obviously, the most important thing. So it seems to wrap up all the Q&A. Thank you everyone for attending. Have a great evening, and love to see you at the next webinar, where we'll have a great guest in Marcel Jacobs, which is a licensed financial planner.